Hello everyone, and thank you very much for tuning into today's webinar hosted by Invest Africa. My name is Alexander Woods and I'm the Partnerships Manager here at Invest Africa. And I wanted to take a few minutes at the start to welcome you to this webinar. For those of you who do not know us, we are a platform for business leaders, investors and entrepreneurs to gain insight into doing sustainable business in Africa. Our network is made up of global organizations, private investors, fund managers, family offices, policymakers and entrepreneurs. Together, they share a desire to identify synergies that add value and strengthen their position and business strategy for the continent. With over 60 years of heritage in promoting businesses and investment opportunities across Africa, we have developed our strategic position as the key voice of industry and governments. Our DNA is connecting businesses and investors, and we do that here in London, throughout our chapter cities, and of course, and more importantly, on the continent itself. As many of you know, we invest in missions to the continent throughout the year, having just returned from a successful mission to Ethiopia, where Invest Africa was able to organise a packed programme for our delegation, including meetings with the President and a number of the cabinet ministers. We will be looking to take investor missions out to Mozambique, the DRC and Francophone West Africa next year. If you're interested in finding out any more about our upcoming investment trips or more generally about Invest Africa, please do feel free to get in touch with me after this webinar. Delighted to answer any questions anyone has on this. Thank you very much to all our speakers on today's webinar and to Eleanor Brown, our content manager, who will be chairing this discussion. Eleanor, over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you also to our panelists for joining us today. We've got a really exciting panel assembled covering a full range of funding options from development finance to venture capital to microcredit. And we're also joined today by two very impressive entrepreneurs who'll be able to share their experiences and insights with us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panelists by turn and ask them to just briefly say who they are and what they do. So first of all, we've got Winnie Biwott, who is the co-founder of Twende. Winnie, could you just explain to everybody what Twende is and why you founded it?
Absolutely. So my name is, hi everyone. My name is Winnie Biwott, and I am a co-founder of Twende. Twende in Kiswahili means let's go. And what we do is long distance ride sharing powered by an application. And we're based in Nairobi, Kenya, currently serving just one region of Kenya, but with the goal of expanding to the rest of the country, but also to countries in East Africa and the rest of the continent. Sorry. It seems.
Oh, sorry. I think let us just. Try. Sorry, I think we're having connectivity issues here. Can you? Hi everyone. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yes,
Franziska,
Arthur speaking.
Yes. I can.
Perfect. Cool. Okay.
Okay, apologies for that interruption. I'll go back to the introductions. I think we got to Arthur. So Arthur Chupeau, he's venture partner for the Baobab network. Arthur, could you just briefly explain what it is that the Baobab network does?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Arthur Chupeau. So I work as a venture partner for the Baobab network, which is an early stage investor and accelerator backing African technology startups. So essentially our model is to go to the country of operation for 1 week, do growth consulting, work with founders, and then basically back them with equity, with funding. With capacity building, and also support them on their fundraising goals. So I'm based in London, but obviously travel across the continent for work.
Thank you. Next up, we have Franziska Hollmann. Franziska is Director for Corporate Finance for Africa for DEG. Franziska, could you just briefly introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Eleanor. Yeah, Franziska Hollmann. Maybe a brief explanation who is DEG. DEG is the German Development Bank, belongs to a very large government-owned banking group, KfW, and DEG is active in financing in developing countries more than 55 years now. We have a total portfolio of more than 8 billion euro, and thereof 2 billion euro in Africa in 28 countries. We offer long-term financing, debt and equity, and everything in between. For corporates, only the private sector, corporates, project finance, financial institutions, PE funds. And our financings are always long-term, and we combine it with advisory and consultancy services under the name Business Support Service. I will maybe talk a little bit later about it. Yeah, myself, I'm 20 years now with DEG, always working in corporates from very small to very large ones. Regional focus, Africa and Latin America, and sector focus in agribusiness. And as of today, I'm heading the African corporate debt financing department, so the entire continent, all industries, manufacturing, agribusiness, services, etc. And from first day of our relationship with our clients until the very last day. I'm based in Cologne, in Germany, but DEG is present in Africa in more than 5 locations with our offices, and my team is spread between Germany and Africa.
Thank you, Franziska. We're also joined today by Wayne Hennessy-Barrett. Wayne is the CEO of 4G Capital. Wayne, could you explain what 4G Capital is? And I think also it'd be useful for everyone to know how 4G Capital works with women in particular.
Well, many thanks, Eleanor, and very honored to be part of this discussion. 4G Capital is a digital lender for micro and SME businesses. We provide unsecured working capital loans using our own proprietary fintech platform in Kenya and Uganda. We lend and collect in M-Pesa or any other form of mobile money, and uniquely, we combine these micro loans with enterprise training so that our clients, who are predominantly women, 75%, are able to get the ways and the means to successfully grow their business. And we're very proud of the impact achievements which we're getting on a consistent daily basis. Our channel partners such as TechnoServe and other partners report that our clients will grow their revenues by an average of 82% over the course of a year by working with us. And so we're doubling down on our technology, our machine learning algorithms, and accelerating our deployment of digital channels to complement the hybrid touch tech approach that we have used successfully up until now. So we're very fortunate to be here, and we hope to play our part in the conversation and indeed in Africa's development.
Thank you, Wayne. And last but by no means least, we've also got Vivian Nwakah. She is the founder and CEO of MedSaf. Vivian, could you explain what MedSaf is and why you founded it, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. So the gray medication market, or illegal medication market, is a massive issue across emerging markets, caused by a myriad of complicated problems and reasons. So for example, in Nigeria, 30 to 40% of all medications sold are fake or substandard. So MedSaf is about bringing the pharmaceutical products to the light, which then improves quality and health of people who benefit from our service. So MedSaf is a one-stop shop for healthcare stakeholders to purchase, manage, and track medications in complicated supply chains. We increase the access to quality of medications, affordability of medications, and accessibility of medications using technology and data. And we work with hospitals, pharmacies, but also governments, NGOs, other healthcare stakeholders who benefit from the transparency around the movement of medications from point A to point B.
Excellent. Thanks very much, everyone. So to kick off the discussion, Franziska, I was wondering if I could start with you. Just give everyone a brief overview of the sort of entrepreneurial landscape for women as you see it in Africa. Is there sort of clustering around certain sectors? What's the sort of rate to entrepreneurship for women? Or just sort of general overview of the landscape.
Sure. Yeah, it's a difficult topic, I have to say, and knowing a little bit also other regions in the world, Latin America mainly, but also Asia. Since I'm focused on Africa, I'm always surprised to see so few women in leadership. I have to also explain that our clients are the larger companies in Africa, mix of African and international companies, or owned by European owners, but many of them are also family-owned businesses. And we were invited recently to a women business breakfast, and we're looking for whom could we invite from our portfolio or from our network. And the list of female leaders was not too long, unfortunately. So almost no managers in our portfolio companies, some second generation leaders in family businesses. The main source of female leaders came from financial institutions, from banks, and from some funds and consultants. So I think there's room for improvement as long as it comes to the leaders. We also see an increasing number of female entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and startups and SMEs. So obviously, the women in the private sector are very, very active and take chances. But it's also challenging in our view, and we will come to it later. So there's huge potential. There is, I mean, obviously a very large group of women which come into the market and as entrepreneurs, and we all need to support these women. We also see some support programs in our companies and our clients to support, but mainly the female workers in terms of health and safety, school and family aspects. So there is not too much of support for female leaders in our clients' network. Maybe that as first impression from my side.
And it's interesting there that you draw a distinction between the larger companies that you tend to work with DEG and the sort of smaller entrepreneurial startup landscape. So Arthur, I was wondering if I could bring you in here from a slightly different financing perspective on what you've been seeing in the sort of venture capital market, and why is it that female founders struggle in that space to raise the same amount of capital as male equivalent?
Sorry, Leona, I can't really hear you well. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
I was wondering if I could bring you in there to discuss why it is in that sort of startup space that female founders struggle to raise the same level of capital as their male equivalent.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, clearly what Franziska says is correct, right? And when you look at the early stage, right, so really coming out of school or really starting a new business, and especially in tech where the Baobab network focus, we see that there are plenty of female founders, right? I mean, we have two in the panel today. So they exist, they're out there, and they just don't build things like, you know, consider basics such as, I don't know, bags, or, you know, some do very, very techy things, right? Very scientific thing. So to your question, I think at large, one of the reasons why female founders don't receive much investment is, I mean, the easy answer, unfortunately, is cultural. There are cultural bias, right, that we all have, and then I think we need to work hard to kind of overcome them. But you know, if I take a few examples, right, entrepreneurship at core is about taking risk. It's about going into the unknown, and it's not something quite common, say for an African woman, where we will say culturally we want them to have self-adoption, getting married, etc., right? So basically, some of them, they are never taken seriously. I talk to a lot of them every day, and then one of the things that always come up is like, yeah, we don't have support, nobody believes in what I do. They tell me like I should probably drop this and do something else safer. Another thing as well why we see less investment for female funders, again at this early stages, you know, I think I want to use the word aggressiveness, right? So, or confidence. Typically, when I talk to male founders, right, they are very confident about themselves. You know, they will brag on something that honestly has low value, whereas a lot of women founders, they tend to be shy. They tend to not basically, you know, talk about their achievement. And of course, if someone like an earlier stage investor doesn't push, doesn't dig deeper, then you know the outcome is like, yeah, it's not an exciting thing. And then you can see that when you talk about salaries, about wages, about negotiation, about equity share, right? And then lastly, one of the things that is also important to mention is that we just don't have enough women going into technology, science, I mean STEM, basically STEM sectors, right? So this is something where more work needs to be done to have more women into STEM fields, and hopefully, you know, attract more developers, and the result will be to have more aspiring female entrepreneurs out there.
I think, yeah, at this point it'd be interesting to bring Winnie and Vivian both in on those points from the perspective of someone who has founded a female-led tech company. So Winnie, perhaps we could start with you, and then Vivian, if you could also share your experiences. What was your experience of that sort of from that early stage funding stage to sort of through to now? What have been the challenges you feel that you've faced?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So Twende is kind of my first startup. So for me, a lot of the things that we learn in the startup world is, sorry? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of things in the startup world has been new to me. The company itself has been 2 years old as of last month. And I think when we started, it was really, I have 2 male co-founders, and then I'm the only founder in the team. But I think I had an advantage because so kind of trying to strike that rapport wasn't very hard. But I think the challenges of being a female entrepreneur has come mostly from the customer side. So our product is a B2C product. So we try to attract drivers who own their cars, but also passengers who are traveling long distance. So from time to time, we'll be meeting drivers in different places. We'll be meeting passengers in different places. And particularly on the driver's side, you realize that car ownership particularly in Nairobi, but also in the rest of Kenya, is predominantly male. So usually because of cultural, of the way things are culturally here, is like people are surprised when they see a woman in, especially high-tech business like Twende. But that said, Kenya is close to 80% informal employment. So most people are in small businesses. Someone owns a shop here and there. Someone is driving a motorbike to give transport to other people. Someone is selling vegetables at the market. So there's generally a culture, an entrepreneurial culture, and it doesn't discriminate between women and men. So I think in Kenya, we have a bit of advantage as female entrepreneurs. But now I think, to allude to what Franziska was saying, it's when it starts getting into leadership, so like trying to raise money, being a female co-founder, then it starts getting tricky. And I'd love to hear more from Vivian also, who is a fellow female founder.
Yeah, Vivian, it'd be very interesting to hear if you share those experiences about customer experience and leadership in Nigeria.
Absolutely. So MedSaf, we're founded in January 2017. We've raised $1.4 million to date. So we've actually been able to raise money, but it's extremely hard. From a challenges perspective, the only challenge that I have is as it pertains to investors or investor relationship from the woman's perspective. That's it. Our customers are doctors, they're nurses, they're pharmacists. And the great thing about the healthcare field, I think everywhere, is that it is a place, it is a field where you've got just as many women in power as men, or if there is an imbalance between women and men, the women who are in charge are in absolute control. So if a woman owns a hospital or she's the head doctor of a hospital, she's in charge. So from the sexism perspective, there are no challenges. And even, I guess I would say, so we're founded by 3 women. So we actually had no men in our founding team until we brought on our CTO a little bit later. So it was all women who started this company. And we actually had an advantage because the typical drug distributor is illiterate. They have not, they don't have an educational background. They can barely use technology. And they have no understanding of packaging and presentation and even just some of the soft skills of conducting business in the ecosystem. So 3 women with beautiful MedSaf boxes showing up at the doctor's office, telling them that we're revolutionizing pharmaceutical distribution in the country was a win for us. And we were embraced by the community in a really touching way, because everybody knows how bad this problem is. I think most people that I talk to in Nigeria or a lot of these other countries, they know someone who's died or has been impacted by fake or substandard medication. So the fact that we focus on quality, we focus on improving people's lives, it kind of helps us break down some of those barriers that we probably would have experienced if we were in any other industry doing something differently. So now let's just talk about investors and people who have money. I mean, I think that the point is that it is a man's world as it pertains to finance. Who is in the position of power, who has who's in the position of leadership as it pertains to the investment community. That's where you're going to start to see an overwhelmingly male-focused environment. And the reason that women do not get as much investment as men is, I would say there's three things that are part of this. There's information, access, and bias. Those are the three reasons that women do not get as much investment as men, or even the opportunity. So as far as the information, there is a language that investors speak, right? There is a language that investors speak. And if you didn't go to school specifically, if you didn't go get an MBA, or you didn't go to school specifically to understand how to talk to investors about your opportunity, as well as how to scale your opportunity in the financial language that they're looking for, they will discount you. And when you look at men versus women, there are more male entrepreneurs. So there are more male entrepreneurs who are friends with other aspiring entrepreneurs that they can go to and actually learn from their exact experience how to talk the language of investors, right? So that information doesn't typically get passed down to women. Or if a woman doesn't have that background professionally, she doesn't necessarily have as much of a network that actually also understands how to speak, I'd say, the language of investors. And that goes down to the second point, which is access. So I don't care what people say. Honestly, investment is an emotional decision, especially at the early stages when you're talking about angel and seed investment. It is absolutely emotional. People will ask you for your numbers, etc. And but at that stage, it really is about, do I feel like I can understand this person? Can I connect with this person? Do I believe in this person? And that is an interpersonal, is a human relationship, and is driven by emotions. So so when we talk about confidence, or we talk about, all these things, you only can show someone that you're investment worthy if you get the chance to sit down with them and talk to them. And so it's about access. How many female entrepreneurs get to sit in the room with the men who are making the decisions and actually be able to speak one-on-one, heart to heart, so that they can understand who they are from an emotional perspective? That doesn't happen as often for women, hence there's less investment to them. And then the last one is bias, and that is definitely cultural bias, etc. The reality is MedSaf is one of the hardest companies out there. I know, what we have to do on a daily basis, and how hard it was to build this company, and how hard it is to continue this company. And we've achieved in a way that many men who started the same company have not. It's a very hard company. But the point is that, that the fact that it is a hard company was a discount to us because we're women. We're going to go have kids. We're not going to be as invested, et cetera, et cetera. All those biases against what women can actually achieve. But if you look at Africa, majority of women are entrepreneurs. They're in the markets, they're selling, they're holding their families down, they're trading. They're entrepreneurs. Africa is made up of female entrepreneurs who are doing very hard things. So it's a complete ignorance to the power of a woman to be able to do just as much as a man can do, but just with an adaptation sometimes. So those would be the three things I would say. And definitely my only problem in business is overcoming these three challenges as it pertains to investors.
Thank you there. Thank you, Vivian. There are a few things there actually that I would quite like to bring Wayne in on, particularly your observation at the end that actually Africa has a very high rate of female entrepreneurship, and a lot of that is driven by the informal sector. So we're not always looking at sort of funding rounds of venture capital investment. We're also looking at sort of micro enterprises. So Wayne, I was wondering if you could come in here with a slightly different perspective on what you see in that more informal sector, in those very, very small, often family companies, and how it might be different or similar to the challenges we've been discussing so far?
Well, thank you. The irony is not lost on me that I'm a male founder entrepreneur opining on the challenges of women, but it's an important subject for all of us, because at the end of the day, there are some frankly ludicrous barriers to individuals and entire sections of society unlocking their potential, being recognized for what they can do and achieve, and everybody else benefiting from those achievements and those contributions. And so I'd like to completely endorse Vivian and Winnie's comments and just add my own upbringing. I was raised by a single mother. Things were not particularly easy for her. I was a soldier for my first career and had a not particularly easy transition to financial services and the entrepreneurial space. And so I'm extremely passionate about unlocking opportunity and general fairness and ensuring a level playing field for all. So I guess to answer the question directly, the landscape across Africa varies. I would agree with Winnie that Kenya is relatively fortunate insofar as there's a very entrepreneurial culture, and a great many micro and small businesses are run by women. But that's not to say that they are not facing similar challenges to women everywhere. And I was most impressed by Vivian's analysis of information access and bias being a framework of obstacles to accessing capital and moving forward. So I'm not going to talk about all the good work we're doing because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what's getting in women's ways. And I'm afraid I have to call out legacy attitudes where women are seen as very, very hardworking resources, but ultimately they are on the wrong end of legacy patriarchal power structures, where if a woman is a victim of a violent crime and goes to the police, absolutely nothing will happen, because that's what happens to young women. Where if a woman gives her all to her family, there is an extremely high likelihood in many societies in sub-Saharan Africa that at the funeral of the husband and father, that another family will appear, because many self-respecting men feel it's incumbent upon them to have multiple families. And that's not merely a cultural or religious practice, it's sort of a macho thing. And the bottom line is that women suffer from these attitudes, and societies suffer from these attitudes, because the studies are countless and numerous from the United Nations, from the World Bank, that a main determinant of a nation's economic and social development is the ability for women to access education and to access work, and thereby to be recognized for what they bring to the party. And so I see this, and my company sees this on a daily basis. We do what we can. All of my senior product managers are women. Our finance manager, our HR manager, female. We've had an extremely impressive Chief Operations Officer, very strong Kenyan woman, and we're looking at promoting again to that same role in the near future. But my customers struggle with access to capital from traditional lenders, notwithstanding the many different lenders which are out there in the market, but getting the right financial products on terms that work for their business, rather than just compounding loan upon loan upon loan, which can seriously lead to indebtedness and lots of other follow-on troubles. That remains an issue. I'll pause there, I think, because I've said enough. I think I'd rather give the ground to some of my sister entrepreneurs.
Well, I'm keen now to open up actually to some questions from the audience. And so we've got one in, Franziska, for you about your investment process. So the question is, at what stage, early, mid, or late, of a women-led agribusiness do you invest? And are there any particular regions, so west, east, north, or south, that you are looking at in particular for that?
For in particular for agribusiness is the question.
This question specifically about agribusiness.
Okay. Well, as I said before, DG's clients are usually the established companies, and most of it are the medium-sized to larger companies, at least if it comes to our direct clients. Indirectly, we finance smaller companies through our network with local banks. So DG has quite a large portfolio of where we refinance local commercial banks, and they then offer financing to almost all industries, including smaller companies. In general, we don't have any focus regions or countries, and agri is one of the many industries we finance. We are not active in all countries in Africa, but in 28 countries. So I think quite broad network, and always happy to expand regional wise. And another source or another access to DG could be via our private equity funds. We invest with private equity, with capital in private equity funds, and these funds also invest in corporates, including agribusiness. So there are different ways, and there's no, I would say, no specific access. So you can access us directly or via our network. At which stage, as I said, the companies are established companies. So track record, I would say, minimum 3 to 5 years. In agribusiness, rather a little bit longer than shorter. And we have we have some offers to finance small agribusiness companies with financings around 500,000 euro. But we want to, or we need to see an innovative aspect in this company. So there's a special program for innovative SMEs. And at very favorable conditions, including agri, and then then steps in our financial sector network, and direct financing starts with like 8 million, 7-8 million above euro in terms of financing. So these investments are the larger ones, and then usually have a longer track record.
Great. We've had another question through about mentorship schemes available to women. Winnie and Vivian, I think I'll direct this one at you. Did you use any mentorship schemes, or are there any that you are aware of that are particularly good at getting women to this point where they can attract investment?
Yeah,
sorry, it was hard to hear you. Okay.
Go ahead.
Maybe we'll start with Vivian, and then Winnie, if you could jump in afterwards.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just asking, you're saying what type of mentorship schemes? Is that what was the question? I couldn't hear you.
Question, are there any mentorship schemes available to women in business that you know of?
If I can be honest, I did do some, but I wouldn't say that they were very helpful. I would say what was the most impactful for me, and I'm just being honest, was to reach out to entrepreneurs who I respected. So for example, one of our very first investors is Bastian Goddard from Orogo TV. I think that they, were one of the pioneers in Nigeria at across Africa. They raised a lot of money. They've created a huge impact. So, you know, I would sit down with him and bet my company over and over and over and over again until he invested 6 months later, right? And so it was about targeting people and trying to find people who I know have been able to achieve the types of things I would need to be able to do, and sitting down with them and building relationship with them one-on-one. That was the most impactful thing that I did. And those are actually my investors, my angel investors. So that's how I was able to get to a certain level of raising money as well.
And Winnie, if you had a similar experience, I think it might be worth mentioning at this point that Twende has done work with the Baobab network. So I wonder if on this point of mentorship, you and Arthur could offer some advice.
Absolutely, yeah. So we just recently raised our very first round of seed funding, and one of the investors is the Baobab network, and we've so far had a really amazing relationship together, and part of actually the investment is that the Baobab network can support us in mentoring us and giving us thought leadership, so that we can be able to take our business to the next level. So and in this manner, I'm speaking even for the rest of my co-founders, is that we've really benefited from the Baobab network. But even prior to that, I think as a female entrepreneur, it's I don't think there are really existing mentorship schemes, just to put it bluntly. And even prior to joining the Baobab network, it was about, you know, leveraging some of the networks I have. Like an example is when we had some doubts about something we're doing, reaching out to people who've gone to the universities we've gone to, or as Vivian mentioned, other respectable co-founders who've also succeeded in building companies. So I think for me, I found it much easier to like reach out to someone who went to my alma mater, who I know is in the space and will probably have good ideas. I've also benefited from like business women who have not necessarily in the startup space, but other legacy companies. So the challenge with that sometimes is that the rules that apply in like big corporates and established companies might not necessarily apply to startups. But I think like the fundamentals of, you know, how to work hard, how to get much more done in a day, how to increase productivity, how to stay on course when, you know, things get very, very tough. I think those stay the same. So I would say that it's very cruel, but like people who tend to be more connected when they like, you know, start their first business or the entrepreneurial venture tend to get more support than people who, let's say, started with literally no networks. So I'd say like leveraging on networks has really worked for me. And you know, now going forward, partnerships like the Baobab network will help us as a business, but also just as founders to grow and to as females, you know, to start owning our spaces a lot more, so that, you know, when the journey gets lonelier, there's usually someone who, or it gets difficult, there's someone who is supporting founders, but also the startup as it grows.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too, just to say that I think there are accelerators that were very helpful, or programs like that. For example, Seed Stars has been extremely helpful to me, but not the women-focused one. I think that's just kind of the delineation between what's been helpful and what hasn't.
That's an interesting point you make there, Vivian. And actually, Arthur, I was wondering if I could bring you in on that. What do you think then that early stage investors who aren't specifically focused on women can do to attract more women-led businesses to approach them?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a few things, right? But if we can sum it to 3 points, I think one is to create this kind of inclusive community of mentors and women leaders, right? So, how do you do that? Well, you can provide like investment education. Back to Vivian's point about the certain jargon used, you can. So what we do us at the Baobab network, we do a lot of workshop, not necessarily for women, but of course they're very helpful for women to really get to know more about exactly what it is when you're going to go sitting in front of a VC or a PE fund and talk about term sheet and talk about valuation and salaries and things like that, right? So provide that investment education is one. Another thing within that is the sharing women in tech experience, right? Think about the word inspiration, which is a big thing in the continent, right? Organizing roundtable with female founder that has succeed or fail, and to kind of learn, have the lesson learned for the aspiring female founders or the future founders. So these are two things that can be done. Another thing, obviously, is to just improve access to VC funding for women, right? When I say improve, is to basically have a kind of a policy or a mentality of we have to be proactive and invest into women entrepreneurship. The Baobab network, over the past 4 years, we've worked with 50% of our company. We've worked with had at least one female co-founder, and then in our current portfolio, we have about a third of our portfolio has a female founder. And what we're looking at doing now is to basically improve that number over the next few years, right? And how do we do that? Well, as a company, for us, we need to say, okay, we want to target female founders. We need to do an extra effort when we talk to one. Back to my point earlier, right? When I talk to a female founder, I need to dig a bit more to really get the business, to really get out the achievement they've done, and so that's just the extra effort that some VC might not do, but us as early stage and as accelerator, we need to do it to make sure that we actually don't miss on something, and then we also bring value to them. More than often, nobody really listens to them, and so our job is to really make sure we do that extra effort. And lastly, if I may, at the end of the day, we need to have a gender diversity in investment boards, right? You need to make sure that an investment committee has diversity, gender diversity. You need to make sure that obviously teams, VC or accelerator leadership-wise has diversity to really have that empathy layer to make sure that everybody on the board can understand everybody, basically.
I think we've got time for a couple more questions before we move to sort of closing remarks. We've had a question through about support in managing business and family budgets. Wayne, I think this might be a good one for you to answer, because I know that your business model includes training on financial literacy. So I was wondering if maybe you could speak to that point of how to support women in managing both business and family life.
Sure. Well, thank you. I guess again, to state the obvious, we don't specifically target women. We target viable, thriving, high potential enterprises who can productively use as little as $25 up to $500 for between 2 and 30 days. Because they're very fast cycling businesses, predominantly self-employed owner operators who will buy and sell, whether it's fruit and veg, whether it's clothing, whether it's a seamstress selling bolts of fabric to make school uniforms, whether it's a baker who's buying ingredients to make cakes, or somebody buying potatoes and cook sets who can then, or a cook set who can then, you know, sell French fries, chips at the side of the road, and their margins can be phenomenal. I mean, we're talking sort of 300, 400, 500%, but they have to work so hard, 20-hour day, literally, to clear $10 net operating income at the end of the day. And so with some really quite simple interventions of helping our clients keep better records, helping them to plan their daily, weekly, monthly cycle, business cycles better, helping them to consider diversification, we're able to sort of meet that extremely powerful craving for a life that is not just a survival existence, but is a life of growth and aspiration where they can provide a better future for their families. The way we do it is through a combination of digital lessons and face-to-face coaching sessions, but both of which are very micro in their format, 5 to 15 minutes delivered at the place of the customer's choice, usually their workplace, at a time that's convenient for them. So we are a B2B model, and we're successful and profitable and growing 100% year on year because we align our corporate success with our clients' individual success. It occurs to me that really the next time we have one of the discussions about women in the workplace, we really need to get my wife, who's co-founder really and the chief of customer success, Genevieve Hennessy-Barrett, who takes the lead in the development of our client business training, and will be able to speak much more convincingly on this than I will. So please note that for the future. We really do desire, our customer success cell is embedded across all business functions, whether it's our technology and our application development through to product design, customer feedback and complaint loops. And so I think simply by adopting a client-centric model that is open and meritocratic and free from gender, racial orientation, national language biases, in other words, running a good business, you will organically provide the opportunity that is so badly needed for so many people who are excluded. So I cannot bask in any glory for dedicating my life to women's issues. What I can do is say that I'm extremely proud of the women customers who we have, and extremely proud of the extremely inspiring women professionals who keep our company moving on from level to level.
I think we've got time for one more question. So we've got a question, Franziska, about the role of DFIs in changing the investment climate. So if we take about the overall male-led businesses attract up to 6 times more capital than female ones, what do you think DFIs specifically can do about that? Is there a role for you to act as a sort of trailblazer in changing the investment climate?
Absolutely, definitely. I mean, one thing is we talk to our clients and also talk about gender issues. We do our social assessment and ask specifically for how many women are employed in which positions, and how are working conditions, while including all aspects of which are important and necessary for female workers and employees and leaders. And in addition to that, we can also give good examples of, well, one of these examples is DG invested in a Ugandan small financial institution, BRAC, BRAC is the name. It's a microfinance institution focused very much on financing women in rural areas. We were talking earlier about agri, so including agri. We invested with private equity, and in addition to that, we also helped them to be even more professional and efficient in what they are doing already on giving access to financing for women in rural areas. And then another example is DEG developed a special advisory program, which is called Gender Smart Opportunity Assessment for financial institutions, but also for leasing companies, for example. And this assessment goes into our clients and assesses the first of all, the status quo and how many women are customers and how is the access to this specific bank or financial institution for women, and then advise the financial institution on how to improve their lending base and their offer, their product mix for female customers. Because female customers can be entrepreneurs. We talked a lot about it. But at the same time, they are also responsible for the family and their mothers and responsible mostly for the household. So they might take loans to build a new house or to send the kids to university or whatever. So this special program tries to, or not only tries, helps the financial institutions to exactly improve this access to finance for female customers. And why financial institutions? Well, first of all, because we see such a huge potential in female startups and entrepreneurs, etc., and founders. But second, because there are so many studies that non-performing loan portfolio goes down and profit goes up if a bank increases the share of female customers in their portfolio. So it's a win-win situation.
Thank you, Franziska. We've got sort of about 5 minutes left, so I was thinking to close. If I could actually just ask you all maybe to give your biggest priority for improving the business landscape for women in Africa. So sort of, if you had to pick sort of one priority, what would that be for sort of 2020? So perhaps Vivian, could we start with you?
So our biggest priority that would help the landscape is just to continue to be successful. Right now we're raising our Series CB to expand into Senegal and Ivory Coast. And our team of 20 pharmacists and other professionals is half women, half men. Who are young people who are starting to take on leadership positions that they absolutely would never have had the opportunity to do in the traditional pharmaceutical market here in Nigeria. So the more that we're successful, the more that we can make decisions that impact other women as well and give them leadership opportunities to move on and do their own thing as well. So that MedSaf is just going to keep on moving.
Great. Wayne, how about you? What's your priority?
Well, similarly, like Vivian, we need to keep growing. We are growing. We're accelerating our scaling strategies into digital channels, and that's great. But Africa's growth rate and the issues that we're facing, the finance gap across Africa is $331 billion. That's the shortfall in available capital for micro enterprises, is way beyond our ability to challenge. And so some of the systemic issues that we've spoken about, bias, the fact that in many African countries, women cannot open a bank account without the permission of their husband, the fact that capital can't be held in women's names in countries like the DRC, Côte d'Ivoire, elsewhere. I think we really want to change this and a number of the other inhibitors to Africa's development. There is a very important role for the investment community and specifically the DFIs to call out these retrograde and backwards policies, which are really only the gift of African governments to address. And that's a difficult conversation for all the obvious historical reasons. But we're coming into 2020 now, and the world needs Africa to succeed. It really does. And we have to enter an era of truth and compassionate, fact-based conversations, where if there are laws which are deeply retrograde to women, then international investors and development agencies have a duty and indeed a mandate and a reasonable right to say to governments, guys, we got to change. This is not good enough anymore. This can't be apology money. This has to be investment money that benefits everybody and doesn't just get locked into supporting incumbent elites. Apologies if that's a little bit controversial.
Thanks, Wayne. Winnie, how about you? What's your priority for improving the business landscape for women?
I think for us, our priority is we struggle a lot to attract female customers just because of what we're trying to do. So for us, we continue to strive every single day to improve our product so that like similar to big companies like Uber, Lyft that do ride sharing across the world. There's usually safety and security concerns, and women sometimes feel left out, especially for very young innovations like Twende. So for us, we continue to improve our product, so we're able to attract more women to use our product. But I think on the investment side, which I've realized our conversation has centered a lot on investing in startups. I would say probably more digital content and coverage of women who are being successful, as Vivian said, who are killing it in the game of their own businesses. So more stories being put out there of women succeeding. Personally, it really encourages me when I see women being successful in what they're doing. So I'd probably say that just more digital content that transcends geographies, industries, that just showcases the work that women have done can really push for this agenda of having more females in entrepreneurship and having them succeed also.
And Arthur, how about you? Can we get your closing thoughts?
Sure. So, at the Baobab Network, what we really do is we nurture the tech ecosystem, or we want to nurture the tech ecosystem in Africa, with, like I said earlier, equity funding, capacity building, and fundraising support. So we are country agnostic, sector agnostic, and we really focus on tech enabling or STEM focused solution. This means women have a big part to play on it, right? And so as we go into the next year, we want to invest into more female-led business across the continent, and we also want to provide more workshop, training session, webinars focusing on women entrepreneurship and success stories in Africa. And in that regards, we're always looking for partnership and stakeholders really interested into that space in Africa. And of course, that includes funds, VC, foundation, keen on supporting this kind of initiative and working with us at the Baobab Network.
And finally, Franziska, to get one sort of impactful forward change that you think will make a difference.
Well, maybe first of all, my wish for Christmas or for the future is I want to talk business with women rather than talking about women in business. But as long as we are not yet there, or only to a very small extent, DEG will focus very much on our financial institutions and train these financial institutions and help them to improve the access of financing for women, because I think they are closest partners in all markets. And in addition to that, we are already publishing all success stories of female entrepreneurs or special programs of our clients to support women in order to really showcase what is possible.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to all our panelists and to everyone who's tuned in. We'll be sending out the recording of this later on today to all of those of you who registered, so you'll be able to listen back. And please do look out for our 2020 calendar of webinars, which will be being released shortly.